Hello everybody, welcome to my channel, all lovers of the Beatles, music and movies and physical media. How y'all doing? Happy New Year! I'm glad to be back with you, my first video of 2019, a year of some nice positive changes for all of us, I hope, and I know definitely for me. But what I do want to talk about today is the new 50th anniversary super duper deluxe box set edition of the band's music from Big Pink. Last year, a year for 50th anniversaries, I gotta tell you. The White Album by the Beatles, Yellow Submarine by the Beatles, Electric Ladyland by the Jimi Hendrix Experience, which I will be talking about that as well. The Kinks, Village Green Preservation Society. So many 50th anniversaries last year. This right here, I was excited about. I love this album and I love the band. And I'm going to talk about the album and this whole set and my thoughts on this. Part of the new year, I'm not going to put myself in any time constraints as far as talking. In this set of Big Pink, you get a new CD of a remix of the album, a new mix done by Clear Mountain. There's 6 bonus tracks, and I will tell you right off the bat, I'm kind of disappointed that there weren't any session tapes or anything like that. The 2000 remaster has 9 bonus tracks, and there's a lot of demos of Richard Manuel on that one. This has some of those, but not all of those. I would have liked some session stuff. There is a 5.1 mix of the album, which I will be honest, I haven't heard yet how that one sounds. And there is a 2 LP version of music from Big Pink that's to be played at 45 RPM. So 2 12-inch, sound quality is amazing. And the original single of The Wait and I Shall Be Released. I just want to tell you about this album and the sort of historical context that this album has and why I think it's one of the important albums of the 60s. It's up there, in my opinion, with Sgt. Pepper and Revolver and Pet Sounds and Blonde on Blonde and Tommy by The Who and a lot of the important albums of the 60s. This is one of them, in my opinion. Everything about this album and everything about the band was designed to go against the grain of what was popular at the time in the 60s. Everybody knew who these guys actually were. They were Ronnie Hawkins' backing band, Robbie Robertson, Levon Helm, Rick Danko, Richard Manuel, and their resident genius, Garth Hudson, on keyboards and saxophones, Rick Danko on bass and vocals, Richard Manuel on piano and vocals, Levon Helm on drums and vocals, and Robbie Robertson on guitar. Occasionally vocals, not all the time. He does have a lead vocal on Big Pink. And there was a mythic quality about them. They backed up Bob Dylan when he went electric. Levon Helm had left because he was tired of the booing. And this was the band that backed him when he went to England. And they relocated with Dylan up to Woodstock in several areas. And the famous Big Pink house, which I think was Rick Danko and Richard Manuel's house. I know Levon Helm, when he finally joined them, eventually had moved in there as well. Robbie Robertson was married. He had a house down the road, but they all convened at this house. The mythic basement tapes with Dylan and these guys came out of that. But a lot of the songs on this album were sort of written and workshopped in that house and performed in that basement. And they got a record deal thanks to Albert Grossman at Capitol. And nobody knew what to call these guys, you know. And you know, they were known as the Hawks, but the word the Hawks became something different in the 60s, especially by that time. You're either a hawk or a dove. When people heard this album, when it finally came out in '68, nobody knew what to make of it. I mean, is it rock? Is it country? Is it gospel? Is it blues? Heck, is it jazz? Because with Garth Hudson, there's a lot of sometimes jazz ragtime influence in there. What is it? Nobody knows. And there was some confusion over what to call these guys as well, because the original label had their individual names printed on the label. There wasn't a group name. But they said, we're the band. Call us the band. And we don't want to be bothered with a name, especially at that time. You know, a lot of bands were calling themselves the Incredible Jug Band, or as John Lennon would later on say, I'm Fred and his Incredible Shrinking Grateful Airplanes. You know, Bob Dylan did the album cover art, this painting, which nobody knew what it was. No name on the cover. You know, just put this out there. The back, this is music from Big Pink and the mythic Big Pink House in West Saugerties. And the gatefold sleeve with photos done by Elliot Landy. You take a look at these guys here. Robbie, Garth, Richard, Levon, and Rick. 4 Canadians and 1 American from Arkansas. They don't look like, you know, hippies wearing love beads and Nehru jackets and what was fashionable at the time. No. And this photo right here, which I always love, it says next of kin up there. Hopefully you can see that. Jim Morrison and everybody was talking about how, you know, don't trust anybody over 30. Jim Morrison singing, Father, Yes, Son, I Want to Kill You. Not these guys. Here they are posing with their family at Rick Danko's cousin's farm in Ontario, Canada. They're posing with their families. Generation gap? We don't know of no generation gap. That was such a contradiction from what was at the time, and that sort of impressed people. You finally had music that was of the earth again. But actually, thanks to Garth Hudson, I always say, a band that shied away from psychedelic experimentation, you had Garth Hudson coming up with all these sonic textures behind every song. It was amazing. When you hear I Shall Be Released with those chords in the background and the wah-wah, that's Garth Hudson on his clavinet playing these sustained chords with a wah-wah pedal. Very otherworldly. Or how in the middle of the hardest rocking track on this album, Chest Fever, it breaks down into like a Salvation Army band right in the middle of it. Everybody begins their albums with a fast rocker. Fast rocker. Boom. In fact, the second track on the album, To Kingdom Come, could have been the opening track. But no, let's begin the album with a slow, funeral-like dirge, and you get Richard Manuel and Bob Dylan's Tears of Rage. Beautiful vocal from Rich. And you begin the album slow with this 5-minute slow dirge, and then you pick up the pace a bit. That also was a contradiction. So this album impressed the Beatles, in particular George Harrison, who went to hang out with them in the latter half of '69 with Dylan and the band in Woodstock. It floored Eric Clapton to the point where he said, I'm leaving Cream, I'm done messing around with this heavy blues, power trio, rock, and psychedelic stuff. He actually wanted to join the band, but didn't have the nerve to ask them, is what I eventually read about him. But this album didn't do as well as their second album in '69, The Band, which had Up on Cripple Creek and The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. But this album still attained mythic proportions, and they remained a mystery, shying away from publicity and interviews. Still an important album. I mean, the songs on here, The Weight, everybody knows The Weight. Take a Load Off Annie. Everybody knows that. This album still stands up, and it hasn't aged, which is a true test to this music, not knowing what to call it. Is it country? Is it rock? People have since come up with a term for this, called it Americana, but that's too simple for these guys. This is music that only Robertson, Levon Helm, Richard Manuel, Rick Danko, and Garth Hudson could play. And nobody could play it like these guys. A mixture of everything, all of their influences put together. Now, in this set, you get, like I said, the 45 RPM on vinyl. You get a booklet with liner notes by David Frick. This is the famous photo inside of the album cover there. The narration that appears on the inside cover. What I like are Elliot Landy's photos in here. I mean, how awesome is this photo right here? Wouldn't you like to be hanging out in the kitchen of the Big Pink House, hanging out with these guys? I would. I love this photo right here because I feel like I'm hanging out with these guys. Sadly, only Robbie Robertson and Garth Hudson are the ones still with us. As Levon passed away a few years ago, and Rick passed away in the 90s, and Richard Manuel sadly committed suicide in the 80s. The CDs are housed in this. I love this photo of the guys here. CDs are housed here, and here's the 45 RPM single. And I don't want to take this out, but there's like 4 photos from Elliot Landy in this. I wish there were more, you know. Kind of disappointed in that. I wish there were more photos in here because he took a lot of photos of these guys, and he's got a website where he's got a lot of the photos of them. Now, the new mix by Bob Clearmountain. I want to say I like it, but I found myself questioning his decisions in ways I never questioned Giles Martin on the Beatles stuff. And I don't know. I'm not bad-mouthing the mix. It's a good mix. It is a very good mix. I don't know if it did need a remix, but some songs are great. Some songs I question. And I did some A-B comparisons on this. For example, the opening, Tears of Rage, originally had centered drums. And then, but there wasn't really anything happening in the left channel. So it sounded like everything was, you know, on this side until Garth Hudson's, you know, sax lines came in on the chorus, ba ba ba, and you heard them very prominently in the left stereo channel. Here the drums are slightly on that side and the saxes are kind of spread out, but he pushed them to the background a bit. And the drums almost sound like they're slightly in another room. The vocal and guitar and piano are more to the forefront. And I sort of question that decision. I mean, it's not bad, but I question why he mixed it like that. I think the sax lines should be up front because they come out of nowhere. You don't expect them. Now, To Kingdom Come, which is the one song that Robbie Robertson sang a lead vocal on during this period until the last waltz, that mix is rocking. I like what he did on The Wait. I don't like the fact that he included studio chatter at the beginning of The Wait. I mean, maybe he wanted to show that, you know, these were all live takes. I mean, keep in mind, Robbie Robertson, Garth Hudson, and the estates of Rick Danko, Levon Helm, and Richard Manuel had to, you know, sign off on all this. But the studio chatter at the beginning of The Wait and Lonesome Susie, if you know this album, the count-offs, I don't know if I like that. But on the song itself of The Wait, there's a keyboard lick Garth Hudson would play live in concert in between the chorus and the verse, when you'd hear the bang, 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 bang. I picked up my bag. Garth Hudson would play a counter melody to that, going ba 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 ba. Well, he does it. You hear it. He faded it up on right before the last verse. The "Get your cannonball now to take me on down the line." Right before that, you hear it. Ba 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 ba. And I was happy he included that because I love that line. It's a beautiful counter melody that Garth came up with that I was always wondering why it wasn't on the album. Well, it was. John Simon, the original producer, had faded it out, but it was always there live in concert. The busiest mix on this, and because I would say, despite some of my questioning, I still like it. Don't know if it's going to be my go-to, the way the new mix of the White Album for the Beatles is, and the way the new 2017 mix of Sgt. Pepper is for the Beatles. Those have been my go-to. I don't know if this will be my go-to, but I'm still playing it, still trying to wrap my head around his decisions. But the others are good mixes on their own. You know, I like how the drums are kicking in Chest Fever, the hardest rocking track on the album. But This Wheel's on Fire, the song Rick Danko co-wrote with Bob Dylan, That is a busy mix. John Simon knew what to leave out of that mix, but Bob Clearmountain, this was done on 4 tracks, surprisingly. Sounds like he decided to raise up all of the faders. Everything is going on in his mix. It's like everything on the kitchen sink. I like how spare the original was. This is everything's going on. You hear Robbie Robertson's guitar licks, and Garth is doing more stuff on the clavinet that you don't hear in the original. Sometimes it's good to hear that stuff, but on this one, I'm not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of it, and I gotta say that. I've wrapped my head around it, I've played it several times, and I still haven't warmed up to that mix. So I don't know what Bob Clearmountain was trying to do there on this. My take on the new mix of music from Big Pink, it's good. Don't know if it's going to replace the original. This Wheels on Fire is not very good unless he tried to modernize it, which I would be appalled if that was what he was trying to do. I haven't heard any interviews with him. I know Robertson and Hudson praised the mix in the new album, in the liner notes. I know Rolling Stone did, but there's been other reviewers out there that have been questioning this one, like myself, in ways that they haven't questioned Giles Martin on the White Album and Sgt. Pepper. So this mix gets a marginal approval from me. I like hearing the drums more on certain songs. I like how he spread the drums out on We Can Talk, the opening track aside too. So I like that quite a bit, because I love drums that get spread out, and back then sometimes you couldn't do that. So that's my take on the 50th anniversary box set of music from Big Pink. The new mix is good. Would have loved more outtakes. Disappointed in that. The sound quality on the new 45 RPM 12-inch vinyl is really good. Love the photos. I'm glad they dropped the price on it drastically so my wife could get it for me as a Christmas gift. And I think if it was still $100 like it was originally priced at, I wouldn't have asked for it. But I love you, Tiff. Thanks for getting it for me for Christmas. And thank you very much. This is a long one. And until we meet again.